Good morning and welcome to our Interagency Fire Season News Conference for 2013. This year's theme will be Know Before You Go. We're going to have some important messages for the hundreds of thousands of Californians, which tomorrow and Saturday will begin heading up to the high country to camp and hike and fish and picnic and swim on national forests and other public lands. Just go over the format real quickly here. We're going to have three speakers. We're going to have Paul Bannister from the Bureau of Land Management. We're going to have Cal Fire Chief Ken Pimlott and Deputy Fire Director for the U.S. Forest Service, Arlen Cravens. After each of their remarks, we'll go ahead and have a question and answer session for media, and then an opportunity to talk to our folks, take a look at the equipment that we have gathered here today from the El Dorado National Forest and our agency partners. Just a couple of things from our standpoint as far as communications this season. We're using social media more and more. Most of the agency partners here today fully engage in social media. Our Twitter account for National Forest Fire Information in California is at R5_fire_news. Region 5 is the Pacific Southwest region of the U.S. Forest Service and includes 18 national forests and covers 20 million acres, or about a fifth of California. Another change to note would be the URL change of our National Interagency Fire Information website, which has been ncweb.org. Best direction to get the links to all of our agency partners would be to go to nifc.gov, nifc.gov, and bookmark that site, and then click on Fire Information, and that will provide you all the information about the new location for NCWeb, where the basics of all our current fires on federal lands would be listed. CAL FIRE has comparable sites as well. So with that, again, we'll be available at the conclusion. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. How many folks knew that there was a fire last year that was the second largest fire in California history? Is anybody aware of that one? Okay. It was actually a fire that grew into such a large size that it burned into another state, into Nevada, but otherwise occurred during a pretty normal to somewhat slow fire season statewide. So last year, our first speaker was busy with that incident. It occurred on Bureau of Land Management rangelands, and they certainly had their hands full. Incident Commander and Bureau of Land Management Fire Management Officer Paul Bannister.
Thanks, Trenton. You can hear me okay? So I want to talk about a couple things that in support of this Memorial Day weekend that supports the need we need for the public to help us accomplish fire safety on our public lands. I'm not going to talk much about specific conditions that are out there. I'm going to let my partners from CAL FIRE and the Forest Service address some of those issues. The two topics I want to discuss briefly are campfire permits and fire restrictions. Campfire permits were designed for use on federal lands, including those that fall under the Bureau of Land Management, but also include the U.S. Forest Service and the National Park Service. Permits are required when you're out camping or recreating on public lands, when you have campfires, barbecues, or portable stoves. And as I go into fire restrictions, there'll be a tie back to some of these regulations. You can receive a campfire permit at any of our BLM field offices, but are also available through my partner agencies that are with me here today. A couple safety tips that I wanted to share when you're thinking about going out on public land and having a campfire is that you need to have, we need to have an acceptable clearance, at least 10 feet of burning material, have a shovel, have a water source, be prepared to extinguish that fire if conditions change, and never leave it unattended. And most importantly, make sure that fire is dead out before you leave your recreation area. So permits are subject to restrictions by local authorities. which brings me to my next subject, and that's fire restrictions. Currently, many of the BLM lands that we manage here in California are already under fire restrictions, as I believe some of the forests are as well. As the conditions continue to get hotter and drier, I anticipate that we're going to have more fire restrictions as the next couple of weeks come upon us, and at some point we may have statewide fire restrictions on BLM public lands. So fire restrictions themselves then affect your ability to have campfires. So it's important that you understand, and all this is very clearly identified on the campfire permit, if you're in a fire restriction area, what the limitations are for having campfires, and sometimes those campfires are prohibited altogether. So I guess the best message and best measure is to check with the local authorities before going out and recreating on public lands, and be clear what regulations are in place this summer. So finally, I invite and encourage the public to get out this weekend and enjoy your public lands. Please be mindful and practice fire safety with us. Thank you.
The federal and state cooperation is especially important in California with the dynamic fire environment that we have throughout the state. Between national forests and state forests and parks and national parks and the BLM lands, about 48% of California are your public lands. So it's very important that we work together. Our next speaker representing California is CAL FIRE Chief Ken Pimlott.
Thank you, Stanton. Good morning. As you've heard today, cooperation between all the agencies is critical because CAL FIRE in California is responsible for the 31 million acres of predominantly private land, wildlands around California. Those lands are intermixed and integrated with the federal land that we've talked about today. About a third of the state is in this private ownership wildland configuration, but fires know no boundaries, and so we work together every day to ensure the message gets out about what we need to do to prevent these fires and mitigate the damage, but we do it together because we're all responding to the same fires because they burn across California. As we approach this holiday weekend, it's important for everyone in California to understand the kinds of conditions that we're facing this year. We have had record low rainfall across most, if not all, of California. The last snow survey that was completed in May showed that we were at 17% of the average for the snowpack. What that tells us is that significant dry conditions, not only at the lower elevations, but at the higher elevations where we would normally see more moisture and have snow later into the spring. It's not there. And we're already seeing fire conditions and fire activity that we would normally see 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 2 months later in the season. We've had in this state 1,600 fires for just nearly 44,000 acres. Normally at this time we would only have 850 acres, or 850 fires and 3,000 acres. So you can see we are way ahead of not only last year, but the 5-year average. So what that tells us is we need to be doing things now to prepare ourselves. All of the agencies you see behind us have been preparing. CAL FIRE has staffed up in many places over a month early, bringing aircraft, fire engines like you see behind us on early to meet that threat. But that means the public needs to do their part to prepare as well. One of the key messages we talk about every year is what's called Ready, Set, Go. You can go to CAL FIRE's website, readyforwildfire.org, and it will walk you through the 3 major components of preparing yourself for a wildland fire. It's broken down into ready. That's doing all those things you do ahead of time, your defensible space, that clearance around your house. The set, that's doing all the things you need to do to have an evacuation plan in place, identify the things you're going to take with you when you need to leave, and then the go. And that means just that. That means safely and orderly leaving your home, your community, not waiting for that evacuation order, but doing it orderly ahead of time when you know the fire is coming. That way firefighters can come in and safely protect your home and your neighborhood, and you can safely leave the area. So again, key messages: we are approaching a very busy holiday season. As you've heard, we want everyone to enjoy recreating out in the wildlands, but that comes with a responsibility. And that responsibility you're hearing today, all the things that you need to do, whether you live or recreate in the wildland. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. As you heard, it's very important not only for public safety, but to prevent resource damage, that visitors are prepared and have some of this important information before they head up to the high country in the Sierra and other destinations throughout California for the holiday weekend. The first step to arriving there safely is to another one of our invited guests today, unfortunately was not able to be here, was California Highway Patrol. And it's not only very important, as you would hear them say, to not drive distracted by texting and so on, but texting and driving is more dangerous on mountain roads in national forests and these other wildlands in California. We have weather in the mountains that changes very frequently, wildlife that can be on roads, and of course visitors that may not be as familiar with that area. Also, there's an aspect of vehicles in getting to these places, which represents one of our largest types of fire ignitions that we have on national forests in California. Our next speaker is going to talk about that in a new campaign by the U.S. Forest Service and agency partners that will address the issue of vehicle-related fires on national forests and other areas in California. My pleasure to introduce Arlen Cravens, the Deputy Director of Fire and Aviation Management in California for the U.S. Forest Service. Arlen?
Thank you, Stanton, and thanks to the media that came out today, the firefighters that came out today, and the partners that came out today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, this is important. So what do we all need to know before we go visit our public lands this weekend and this summer? We need to know a lot of things. We need to know that our protective services specialists have told us that the January through April period this year has been the driest in about 49 years. That's important. We need to know that, as Chief Pimlott mentioned, that we're about 6 weeks ahead of fire season right now, and within another week or two, we may be 8 weeks ahead relative to the dryness of our fuels. We need to know that the combination of our fuels and dryness and what we may experience in the weeks and the next month or so ahead, that we have the potential to experience a much above average fire season. We need to know that while it's dry out there, and we know that, what we don't know is how active the fire season will actually be, and that's going to depend on the number of ignition sources that occur out there. So we heard a little bit about trying to make sure our campfires are not one of those ignition sources, and we'd like to talk a little more about some other things that might be those ignition sources. You know, we can look back at just last fire season, which was not an overly active fire season, but it was a very active fire season in Northern California, when when we had quite a few fires. But even last year paled in comparison to 2008 fire season in Northern California, when thousands of lightning-caused fires burned over 1 million acres. And certainly last year paled in comparison to Southern California in 2003 and 2007, when millions of Southern Californians were reminded yet again that they live in the wildlands. And so all Californians, as Californians, we all either live or touch the wildlands, many of which are our public lands that we share. Another thing that we need to know before we go this weekend and this summer is that the partnership agencies in California are all working together to prepare for this fire season. That's not enough. To be as successful as we can possibly be, not only do the agencies with wildland fire responsibility need to prepare for the summer, but all the citizens of California need to prepare with us as partners as well. The The conditions are going to exist this year where fire could once get started, burn quite aggressively. There's little that we can do to prevent lightning fires. However, when they occur, we're going to respond aggressively with the intent to hit them hard and keep them small. We know that we're very successful as a wildland fire organizations at containing fires while they're small. Only about 2 or 3% of the wildfires escape our firefighters' initial and extended efforts to contain those fires. Yet those 2 or 3% of the fires become very large, very expensive, very damaging, and sometimes cost lives. And that's what we would like to prevent. And another thing we need to know is that our top priority is going to be public safety. And with that, we need to ensure that our firefighters come home at the end of the day to all of their families. I think collectively, the partner agencies, that's their highest priority is life safety. We need to know that we can prevent wildfires. We need to know that only we can prevent wildfires. And I think this is the year to heed Smokey's message. We need to know that nationally in 2011, about 84% of the fires were caused by humans. So that's almost 64,000 fires compared to approximately 10,000 fires nationally that were started by lightning in 2011. So humans can and do make a difference. And I'm convinced that this year, of all years, that one less spark will in fact result in one less wildfire. The reason I believe that is the fuels are so dry that almost every spark that hits those fine fuel grasses along the roadways and the highways is likely to start a fire. So one thing we can do as individuals is we can make sure that we are not dragging chains when we're trailing our boats and our trailers out into our public, to enjoy our public lands this weekend and this summer. We can make sure that there's nothing dragging under our vehicles, ensure that our tire pressures are properly, our tires are properly inflated, and that the brakes are well maintained. And that when we pull off the road to obey the law and be safe, to answer that cell phone call or make that call, that we don't pull off the road and drive onto the dry grass and inadvertently start a fire. Almost nobody wants to be the cause of a wildfire. But sometimes it happens. And when it happens, together we're preparing and will be prepared to respond quite aggressively. When wildfires do occur, they present incredible risk not only to the public but to our firefighters as well. And to really invaluable natural resources, including water supplies that are vital to our human habitation of the state. So another thing that we need to know before we go that will make a real difference is something that Chief Penlot mentioned earlier, which is, are we ready for wildfire? Will we be set for wildfire? And will we assist the firefighters and law enforcement officers when we're requested to go? Because to the extent that our citizens can be ready, set, and go this season, that will leverage the ability of our firefighters to do their job on the ground at protecting our homes and our valuable natural resources and water supplies. Another thing that we need to know before we go is that wildfire does not respect boundaries, political, jurisdictional, or ownership-wise. So collaboration and a collaborative approach, including all stakeholders, landowners, councils such as fire safe councils, municipal, county, state, and federal agencies, really need to work together and are working together. We need to know that they are working together to address this challenging wildfire problem. And one thing that we're working on nationally at all levels with many partners is the National Wildland Fire Cohesive Strategy. And it's an opportunity to take a look at the big picture and give a voice to all those concerned, from local volunteer departments to federal agencies to the citizens and the public. It's a way that we can look at our collective interests and put together a big picture, strategic way to address the wildfire situation out there, part of which is a need to ensure that we're maintaining and restoring our public lands. Ecological restoration is a really important goal of the Forest Service. Building fire-adapted communities, we've heard some from, is outlined very well at readyforwildfire.org. And responding to wildfires is one of the things we're talking about today. Those are the three key elements of the cohesive strategy. So you've heard that we're prepared. You've heard that there's a lot to need to know. I'd like to leave you with this thought, that when wildfire visits your community this year, as it may, that we need to know that you have adopted your FireWise practices and principles, and that you have incorporated the ready element of Ready, Set, Go. Because in doing so, in creating that defensible space around your home and hardening your home from wildfire, what you're doing is you're giving these firefighters an opportunity to succeed, to keep the fire small, to go home at the end of the day safely, and to get back in their stations and their bases to be available to respond to the next fire, to hit hard and keep it small. Lastly, as you head out to the public lands to enjoy them this weekend and this year, please remember that one less spark will equal one less wildfire. So my thanks to all the partners that participated today for doing their part. My thanks to all the citizens of California who have done their part in reducing fuels and hardening their homes, and to those who are planning to get that done in the next week or two. Hopefully it's in the early morning hours when there is no wind, when the relative humidity and fuel moisture is high. That's the time to mow your lawns, not in the afternoon, please, and not on windy days. But those that are going to do that, my thanks to you. My huge thanks to all the firefighters who have done so much to prepare to be ready to respond this year. And special thanks go to our local volunteer firefighters across the state. Those volunteers carry a huge burden for us all. They help protect us in so many ways. They are usually our first line of defense, and they do so with such generosity that if you have an opportunity to thank a volunteer firefighter, please do. So please remember, only you can prevent wildfires. Thank you.
Thanks to each of our speakers. You heard a number of different websites, great sources of information to know before you go, to get some of that information for your home, for brush clearance and other fire safety tips, or information about your destination if you're headed out to a national forest this holiday weekend or another location. CAL FIRE's site is the readyforwildfire.org. Wildland Fire RSG is the National Interagency Ready, Set, Go program. You heard a little bit about the National Cohesive Strategy. That one is fireadapted.org. And lastly, the materials mentioned in the One Less Spark campaign, the graphics and other campaign materials are available by going to the Forest Service regional site on our Flickr page. And that is an interagency effort. Those are public domain materials, and we encourage partners to use those materials to help get out the message about preventing the vehicle-related fires with the tow chains and so on. And our website is fed.us/R5. It's on a lot of the materials we have printed here. So that'll link to our Flickr page where each of those graphics is available for public use. So we'd like to thank everybody for this formal part of our presentation.